Grief is a wilderness that you walk through alone. We are creative beings. Whatever it is, that if I can step into that, that's a wilderness.
Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with artist, writer, and dear friend Jane Edberg, the author of the book The Fine Art of Grieving, a memoir that explores the tragic death of her son and how she used art and ritual creativity to process her trauma into something healing. Look, as much as we try to hide grief, it's a part of our daily lives, from the way we relate to each other, to the way we relate to the natural world, to the way we relate to ourselves. So if you're someone who is struggling to process the loss of a loved one, or if you're a person struggling to process what it means to be human in this world, there's something for you in this episode. Get ready. It's time to enter the Wild Lab. Welcome back to the Wild Lab, everybody. I'm your host, Ned Widener, and today I have a very special guest. She is an artist, she's a writer, she's a dear friend, and Jane Edberg, the author of The Fine Art of Grieving, is with us today, and we're going to talk about grief. We're going to talk about wildness. There it is right there, folks. We're going to talk about a lot of things. Jane, how are you? What's alive for you today?
Wow, yeah, I'm doing great. I think, you really woke me up when you asked me to do a podcast about the wildness of grief. And I was like, wow, that's like, that opens that up. We have such a limited view of what grief is. And when we start to unpack it in terms of its wildness,
Mm.
that offers up all kinds of possibilities, because that isn't that discovery. When you go into a wilderness, you discover things, right? You discover yourself, you discover the world. And I think grief is right there.
Absolutely. So let's talk. You've been an artist and writer for 50 years, like most of your life, right?
Yeah.
And you've taught at Gavilan College, you've taught at Sierra College, you taught at UC Davis, professor of art, and and me as well. Like you've been a bit of a writing mentor for in my own work as well. So I
Yeah.
thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'm curious though, what as an artist, as a writer, what role does wildness play in your art? Whether it's the creation of it, the inspiration, what role does it play?
Well, I'll start with what it doesn't do. Like, if I'm not aware of wildness while I'm making art, then I'm stuck in my own cultural binds. I'm stuck in like who I am, where I came from, what I know, what I learned, what I believe, and that sort of thing. And then that's a very tight container, and it's not always accurate. And so when I approach art in terms of, and I don't know that I've used the term wilderness or wildness, but thank you for that, because that's exactly what it is to, um, it's like opening up a door of all the other possibilities that I hadn't considered. Like, what are they? I don't know, but what are they? And so going in with the intent of exploring,
Mm.
and going in with the intent of, this might not feel good, or this might, without any kind of like resistance, even if there is resistance, going in with resistance and going, I feel resistant, but I'm going in. um because I feel like when I've delved into, so in terms of art, the making of art, when I've got my hands on a piece of clay and I have no idea what I'm doing, I can set a time and I can set a space and go, let me discover what I'm doing, rather than having an actual plan. And I learn more about myself as I push my hands into the clay. And at first I start treating it like I know I should. And then I tell myself, no, what if you did something different with this? Maybe that would give you a different possibility, a different set of equations, a different knowingness about what this material does. Maybe you just have to feel it and touch it and put it on your skin, or flatten it out, or do what you haven't done with it to discover, what is this made of? What am I made of in terms of relating to it? And that might sound kind of strange, but it opens up
No.
all kinds of possibilities. It opens up all kinds of possibilities, rather than, I'm going to make a figure about grief. Um, it's going to have hands over the face, or, this crouched figure in fear. But there's so many other avenues to look at, and there's so many different aspects of grief. It's not all fear, it's not all anger, it's not all pain. It's sometimes the beautiful little feather that floated down out of the sky, and you think for a moment, there
Mm,
was a bird just above me, and this feather
mm,
just came down, and the world is this incredibly wondrous place.
mhm,
Or when I pushed my hands into the clay, I saw my fingerprints. My fingerprints are in the clay, you know?
mm,
So there's like this discovery, and the same with words. It's like I can know what I want to write about and set that intent to do it that way.
mhm,
But the best writing that I've ever done is when I just go, give me the page of paper, give me the pen, or that's just metaphorically, so it's the
mm,
computer keyboard, and just allow myself those words, gibbery jabbery stuff comes out, schlocky stuff, dog work, whatever. And then suddenly there'll be some little morsel that pops up, the little feather coming from the sky that
mhm,
gives me something that I feel it like. And I tend to think that my best work comes when I've allowed not only stepping into the wilderness of art and writing and living, but feeling it, like really being okay with feeling it, which isn't always great.
mm.
You know, sometimes it's like horrifying.
Totally.
There's certain
Yeah.
things that I had to write about that I couldn't write about them because I was trying to write about them so that people could, it would be easy for people to digest. And I'm like, no, I need to write about this in a way that's raw and real, and
Mm,
in the way that I can discover for myself, what am I writing about? What's coming to me as I do this, and as I ask myself questions and pull it apart and pull it apart, so I can begin to understand a deeper meaning or a deeper core to something that informs me about the change I might be able to make in my life that might be better.
mm.
If
So
that makes
it's
sense.
yeah, no, absolutely. It's beautiful. And so it's like a learning process for you.
Total learning process.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm making art unless I'm learning something. If I'm not learning something, if I'm just doing the thing that I already know,
Yeah.
then it's
Yeah.
like kind of boring almost, you know? And I feel like I slam myself against that wall going, it's got to be beautiful, it's got to be great, it's got to have meaning, it's got to have this, it's got to have that.
Mhm,
And then I try to force it, and it's outside of myself. It's not
mhm,
from here.
mhm,
And if I make it from my body, from my being, so that's the other thing. There's a kind of
mm,
a wilderness of being
mm. So
rather than just I'll
what
explain.
do you mean by that? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So it's similar. Like, I'm a control freak.
Mm,
To I like to control things, and I have to fight with that all the time. In art, in writing, in life, in relationships, whatever it is, and with myself. And when I allow myself in the wilderness of being, which is the things that come up that I'm not going to try to suppress, or the things that come up that I don't want to believe are true, or the things that come up that I feel embarrassed about, or stifled, or that tighten my body, or bring up anxiety, or I'm embarrassed about, whatever it is, that if I can step into that, that's a wilderness. That's
mhm,
uncharted for me, because it means I've not gone there. I've not explored that. I've not allowed myself to have those feelings fully and
mhm.
engage them and understand them to the point where I can go, well, I don't have to be embarrassed about that anymore because that actually is normal. Or I don't have to be embarrassed about that. That's not normal for most people, but it's normal for me.
Mhm,
Whatever it is, So it's the same, whatever is relational inside of myself and my own wilderness of being. It's
mhm,
similar in terms of the wilderness of art, the wilderness of writing, the wilderness of relating, relational wilderness,
mhm,
and those things scare me, but I feel like the times that I embrace them, the times that I allow and show up for it and try, and of course it's not, you don't just show up. You have to like
mhm.
struggle, you know. It's like I
Totally.
feel really uncomfortable right now because I don't like doing this. I've avoided this for years. Um, but gosh, there's something there. I mean, and it's informative, and it opens the heart, I think.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it opens it in a way that breaks it, which is also okay.
It is.
It's
It's
also
not. It's maybe not what we were looking for,
no, because we're
but it
trying to hold it and
right.
protect it, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
So
I love that. The wilderness of being.
the wilderness of being, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of describing what it is that we do as artists, as writers, as creators, and just as humans, trying to
Mm.
access, like you said, our heart, trying to access
Yeah.
the deepest core part of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And trying to access our what like what a lot of trackers would call and other people would call like our wildness within, like this thing
Yes.
that is in here that we don't
Yes.
necessarily understand,
Oh, that's so good.
right?
That is
Yeah.
the thing that got me through grief. The you know, a lot of people are saying you can't heal from grief, that grief is forever, that you just learn how to live with it, and
Mhm.
that's not true for me. So that's not true. I mean, if one
Right.
person can, heal their grief, I mean, I still have loss. I mean, I
Mm,
miss my son down to my core.
mm,
And there's times that I can cry about it and so forth, but I don't have that deep, like, you know, um, crazy, painful. I'm not holding this big, giant wound anymore of grief, and the reason being is that the way to my grief was through my own wild animal. It
mm,
was through my, not from cultural, like cultural would be going to grief groups and
mhm,
reading about grief and looking at all the theories of grief and so forth. But the thing that worked so much for me was to find the wild animal mother. That wild animal mother wanted to push and toss when I was in front of his body. I poked him and touched him and pulled some of his clothing off in a respectful way, but I wanted to see his
mm,
body, what happened to him, and smell him and feel, his face and look at his mouth and his eyes and explore. And it's like, he's not in there. And it's that the animal that you let go of what anybody's going to think about it, any kind of shame around it, any kind of embarrassment around it. And I just did what my animal self needed to do to understand that he was not there. And
yeah.
that taught me so much about just even like, then who am I? I could feel myself. I can, I have energy. This is such a weird, weird thing that it's a phenomenon, right? This diet, life and death thing.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a point at which the animal understands that better than the human brain does,
I think it absolutely does. I think
right?
the human brain has a really hard time wrapping, especially culturally, wrapping our
Yeah,
minds around this concept of death,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And grief. But I think you're right though, but deep down my animal self, my wild self knows it fully
yeah,
and
yeah.
understands it. And like I've talked about this, and I don't want to get there's some things I want to touch on, but you made me think of um, some things I've talked about with when people come out to hunt with us, and when they drop the blade into an animal's body for the first time,
Mhm,
right? They often have a very
mhm.
visceral reaction, and a lot of emotions can come out because it's for many of them it's the very first time that their bodies, right, have been connected to the process of death. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
they
yeah.
have in other ways, but like it's a very in your face
It's
bodily
very deep. Yeah,
experience of it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And yeah, I that wild animal mother got you through grief. I just love that. And
That's really what it was, honestly. And
yeah,
I went to grief groups. I read every book I could get my hands on. I talked to counselors and so forth, but it was that it sort of runs right through here. It's
yeah,
not up here at all. It's
no,
like right through here. Um, that understood, that
hmm,
knew, and it knew what to do. It knew
mm,
that it could act out in ways that were considered a little crazy or unusual or
hmm,
and and it was okay because that's what that mother animal needed to do.
Yeah.
You know, and when you watch animals and certain animals, when they have loss, you see them do things that they ordinarily didn't do in their animal life. They do something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, can we back up just a little bit? Because I
Yeah.
love all the things you're saying. I feel like some of the people in the audience that may or listeners may not have read The Fine Art of Grieving yet, right? And so can you back up a little
On
bit and just
Amazon. All right.
can you back up a little bit and
Yeah.
just tell us so you're talking about your son's death. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what it is that you're talking about? This what did this wild animal mother have to grieve?
Hmm. Say that again. What is your?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not
yeah, yeah.
sure what your question is.
Yeah, well, so what actually I guess I'm actually looking for a little bit of like the nuts and bolts without giving too much of the book away
Yeah,
necessarily,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that
Right.
people can understand what you're talking about and what you
Hmm.
actually went through.
Right.
So when you say things like the my wild animal mother had to grieve,
Hmm.
what was it that she
What did
had to
that look like?
grieve?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, upon the first hearing of his death, I did the uh, culturalized human brain thing and thought, how's that true? How do you know? When
Hmm.
somebody had told me.
Right.
So, but when I talked to the coroner, that was a whole other thing. And I still thought, what if it's a mistake? I need to see his actual body. Um, the coroner told me that he'd been hit by a train. So she advised against it. And I said, no, because I didn't tell her this, but I hear this from other parents. I can only speak to losing a child, but is that they needed to see the body. Like they need to see the body and be able to involve themselves in that dead body to be able to understand fully that loss. And I think that so the other part is that when I finally was able to see his body, it took a long process. It was nuts.
Mm.
Um, Everybody, it's all set up right in a funeral home, and it's
Mhm.
got like little, nice little white cloth over him, and he's in the little death pose. It's like there are all these things. It's like that's not right. I wish I could have just seen him on the railroad tracks. It's like I wish I could have seen, and my son did, and my son was glad that he did. He wasn't at first. Not until later did he realize that he was glad that he saw that because he saw him at the moment of his death and dying. And that was very powerful. And he understood that animal part of, it. And when he saw him set up in the funeral home, he said that was weird. That was like they shaped him like a log, almost like a cake decorated or something. Like they're covering it up. They put makeup on him, and I asked them not to, those sorts of things. So I've always been a nature girl, so I'm like, I want things straight up. I don't like decorating to hide anything. I don't do it to my own face,
Mm.
it's just me. That's just me. But that's part of my own um holding space for my animalness because I don't want to ever lose that because I learned so much by it. So that mother animal, she understands the difference between life and death, whereas the human me enculturated part didn't. And that's
Yeah.
where I struggled. I struggled with the intellectual, emotional, but keeping the emotions within the framework of acceptable emotions. There was a point in which it was 2 days after my son's death that I went and stayed with another friend, and there was some really funny stuff happening in her trailer where she had these rats that had taken over her trailer, but she'd gotten rid of them just a few days before I came, and she was telling the story of these rats, and I started laughing hysterically. And the intellectual part of me, the human part of me or the enculturated human part of me was like, this is wrong. You shouldn't be laughing. You've lost a child. um, how can you find this funny? But then this part of me, the mother animal part, was like, this is really funny. And this feels really good to laugh in the midst of grief, because what it did was it opened up this thing inside of me, and the tears came and the
Mm,
crying came. So I was
mhm,
laughing hysterically, and then I sobbed hysterically, and then I laughed hysterically. And I was so thankful that the two friends that I was with laughed and cried with me. I mean, who gets that,
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's a really important thing, that we have emotions, and even in the midst of grief, even in the midst of losing a child, you can have whatever emotions you want.
right,
Like, that's important.
yeah,
And that's where the healing comes in. And for me, 2 days after, there was an increment of healing, because I knew I could still laugh at something. It was just and it wasn't so much at laughing, it was just that I still had a range of emotions that were available to me.
right.
Yeah.
Bes- besides grief, besides sadness, right?
Besides the sad, but right beside the
Yeah,
sadness,
yeah,
which
yeah,
meant I could also feel loved. I could also feel, whatever other things I was needing to feel, good or bad.
yeah,
And that in the animal wild part, that's okay. In the enculturated part, it's not okay. People scorn that. You know, I was, people were, as soon as I was touching my son in the funeral home, everybody left the room. Like, everybody's like, whoa, oh my God.
right,
You know?
yeah,
And what if everybody joined me, you know, with those that could. But we don't have a culture that supports that. It's kind of like, even the director kind of stuck his head in, like, oh, is everything okay in here?
hmm, yeah,
And I'm like, I just want to take him home, you know,
right,
and hold on to him for a couple days and
right,
wash his body, wrap him up. I
mhm,
want to bury him. I want to
yeah.
set him on fire, which is
You
weird.
do,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
did.
yeah,
Me, like the animal part is like, I want to take care of this.
yeah,
I don't need you to take care of this,
right,
but
right.
that's not allowed.
No, and I was really struck by there's a moment in your book, and it's at this exact, or I don't know exact, but like this day, right, where you're looking
Yeah.
at your son. And it's very graphic, and I can't imagine how that must have been for you, the healing process. We can talk about that if you like, but um,
It was actually beautiful, if I can say that.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
It was beautiful and utterly devastating. It was utterly devastating, but it was beautiful and horrendous and hideous, and it was everything. It was everything. It was all of it, but not funny.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
But
yeah.
sorry, go. What were you gonna say?
Well, yeah, no, but it's this moment where um and it's just all the things you're saying where you write about that we mask death, right? Where
Hmm.
you write about where
Hmm.
we mask the process of it, we put makeup on it, we make it look like something else. I mean, we and you're right, we do it from everything from our loved ones. I mean, we put our elders, our old and dying people away in nursing homes, or I mean, convalescent homes, or whatever you call them, so that we
Hmm.
don't have to watch it, so that we don't have to see it, so that
Hmm.
that it's absent from
Well,
us, it's
there's
distinct from
different
us.
reasons for putting people in nursing homes, but yeah, and
Sure, for
sometimes it's
sure.
just because we can't deal with it. We don't even have time to deal with it.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and I'm not there's not making a judgment statement
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that at all, but just the process of it does removes that aging and that death process
Mm-hmm.
from our lives, right?
Hmm.
Um and I think there's we were talking about Francis Weller before we hit record, and I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, and so some of the listeners out there, I'm sure, are going to like yell at me, but he talks a lot about the process, or like what happens to a society that masks death, right? That hides
Oh.
death, and
Uh-huh.
the ramifications of that. And one of the things he says, and I forget exactly his words, the phrasing that he uses, but it says that we live in this temporary state of death because we don't uh, we don't embrace it. Because we don't embrace it as a part of life, then we're like afraid to do the things that we want to do. We're afraid to make the choices and make the leap to the things that we feel that are, culture animal mother, our wildness of being, which I might steal and love. I love that. Like the thing that inside of us, um, that feels right, since we like hide death and mask it in all these variety of ways. um we live in this stagnant state that
Mhm.
we're afraid to act, we're afraid to actually live because we don't embrace
Yeah.
death,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that, my friend, is what people are calling grief.
Mm.
But
Is
that's
it
not what grief is.
what
That's
is
like a weird grief. That's like unnatural grief.
okay.
Because I've been there. I understood it because I was like afraid to share my feelings about it. I was afraid to say, I even was afraid to say that I healed from grief because people were like, you couldn't have healed from grief. Nobody heals from grief. You must be in denial.
Yeah.
No, I found that place where I could. I just could.
Yeah.
And it didn't come easily. But it's interesting what you're saying, that masking thing. That's a huge part of it because when I was in a grief group, that's what everybody was doing. Everybody was being on their best behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was being very like they'd sob, a little bit, but then oh sorry, they apologize. Um, they share their stories, and everybody's so sorry for your loss. There's like this whole protocol that we've learned. Keep it easy,
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was going to lose my mind in a grief group
In those groups,
because
yeah.
I'm like, we should all be wallowing on the floor, going completely insane. Like,
Right.
or at least we should be up, jumping up and down. And a friend of mine, he was in the Peace Corps and he was in Africa, in very remote village, and a child died while he was there. The whole village went crazy. Like they brought food, they're music, they're coming and taking care of the mother, they're holding the child and carrying the child to each person and
Mm-hmm.
telling stories and wailing. And he said it was like he'd never seen anything like it because in the States it was like all very polite and all very kept in a little room and tapped down and contained. And you brought
Mm-hmm.
casseroles to people. I mean, there wasn't
Mm-hmm.
how are you doing, but there wasn't a like this explosion of life up into that death moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the ways through grief is to really embrace life and love, which is love is an action. It's caring and sharing and opening up and being, and that is what got me through, is that and a combination of writing and making art and getting in
Yeah.
touch with my feelings. Um but that masking, yeah, I did plenty of masking,
Mm-hmm.
uh because I was met with masking and I didn't know what to do. I'm like, I better put a mask on because this person is
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. So I
Mm.
was masking to make everybody else comfortable
Right. Not yourself, for the other people that you're
for the other
interacting
people.
with.
Yeah,
Right.
which
Yeah.
ultimately was for myself because
Sure.
then people started to ask me how I was doing at one point where I was like decided to take the mask off and they were like, "Whoa." And some people were like they just walked away from me like they're
Mhm.
like angry that I had done that. And
Mhm.
I would actually was being very careful. You asked me how I'm doing. This is how I'm doing, and I was,
Right. Like
expressive about it, but it didn't come across. I didn't get met well sometimes.
yeah.
Other times people like good, but they're shorten this conversation. It's making me
Right.
uncomfortable. And the rare person would be like, grab me and start sobbing,
With you.
and join me. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
and that is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it takes a person, what, like you said, it's really uncomfortable for
Yeah,
people,
well,
right?
the
Like
culture is just
this
all goofed up.
right. When we ask somebody, how are you doing? Like, no one really cares. People don't want to know the answer to it. They want to hear
No,
fine or good or okay or whatever. Like
yeah,
they don't want to look you in the eye and and
yeah,
and 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 shake you and sob with you or laugh with you and cry with you, the whole thing. They
yeah,
don't want to do that because it is it takes a lot
It
of
does.
it takes a lot of knowing this your wildness within. It takes a lot of knowing who you are, and
Mhm.
and a lot of work to actually get to a place where you're able to do that, right?
And it
And
takes time, and
time
it
as well.
takes a particular understanding and acceptance of allowing people to share, because sometimes it's like, whoa, that was too much sharing, and
Yeah.
I'm that way. Sometimes people come up and share, and I'm like, oh, that was more than I wanted. So I mean,
Right.
but it's partly because of I think a lot of it has to do with how much time I have to do that. I don't always have enough time. I've got to get from point A to point B, and I think we're all kind of in that boat. So there are a lot of reasons why we wouldn't do that. But I would have to say that generally and culturally, my experience is that we're walled off from it. So grief is a wilderness that you walk through alone, even
Mm,
if you have people with you. It's ultimately so individual. And so, I mean, you can share it, you can be supported through it, and that's helpful. But ultimately, when all's said and done, you're laying in bed with the other person's falling asleep or whatever's
mm,
going on in your life.
interesting.
You're with it 24/7, and you have to make all the decisions about how you're going to approach it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Let's dive. I want to. That's a really interesting perspective. I want to dive into that a little bit because um how well how did you what was your process for moving through the grief? And I asked this question, I'm going to ask it in a real like a two-parted question, I think. First is how did you move that, what was your process for moving through the grief? But then also you say you move through the grief alone, right? And in reading your book there's a lot of that, and then there's a lot of moments with others
Hmm.
as well. There's a
Hmm.
lot of like
Which
very
I don't mean
intent.
to dismiss that, because those were very
Yeah,
important. Those really helped me. Yeah.
yeah. And so like and I again I go back to Francis Weller when talking about grief, because one of the things that he talks about is that um is the importance of both isolation, both being alone,
Mhm.
and community, right? Like
Mhm.
how the two things are what he says is necessary to move through grief together, that we need both of those
I
things.
agree totally,
Yeah.
like a million percent. Yeah, because however isolated I felt sometimes, in that isolation, I was able to um, go. It was a struggle, but to discover that I was in a wilderness, and
Hmm.
oh, well, it's a wilderness. The other thing about it is that if you lose somebody that's really close to you, you no longer are you. You're like, you don't
Yeah.
you don't even have the self that you had before. You can never go back to the self that you were.
Yeah.
For me to lose my child, I was like, it changed all my relationships. It changed my relationship to the world. Everything in the world was different. Looking at it, everything changed.
Yeah, you're a different person.
You're a different person. And
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had a self, like I didn't even know who I was at that point. So you don't know who you are, and you're going into this wilderness without any kind of instructions. Well, they give you instructions, but they don't really work.
Yeah. There's no map through the
There's no
wilderness.
freaking, yeah,
No.
even if they give you a map,
Right.
you
Yeah.
you try to follow it, but it's not right, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have to find your own self and make your own world and create your own meaning and rediscover everything anew.
Mm,
Um, and if you don't do that, then you get trapped in what they're calling grief.
mm. And so remind me again, what is it that we call grief, or the society is calling
When
grief?
it's the masked. What did he say? It's the place where you think you're supposed to do certain things and act certain ways, and then you get caught up in this enculturated, whatever the culture is, enculturated thing about how you're supposed to do this thing and how you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to act. And it is so, that in itself is devastating because it's almost impossible to do right. There's no right about it. It's actually, for me, felt all wrong. So I'm living in this grief place that is described for me what it is, what it's going to be like. You'll never heal
Mhm.
from this. You're going to carry this. Why are you laughing? It's not funny. Um, you know,
Mhm.
um, why are you doing that? That's you need to go see somebody. It's like all this stuff. So um, that burden of containing grief and not allowing it to have its own expression,
Mhm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the expression doesn't match anything you've ever frickin' seen before, then you are in uncharted territory.
And from what I'm hearing you say, that's where you want to be.
And that's where you want to be. But you
Right.
don't. And you're like,
Right.
no, but you do.
Right. But you
Because
do.
there is where this opening, this I'm here,
Mhm.
this is where the life force exists, is in the openness of the space, allowing space for grief because it's really freaking expansive,
Mhm.
rather than containing it, putting your mask on, living in this tight burden of a bubble of grief, which they call grief because everybody flips out in that space. It's like really horrendously painful.
Yeah.
It's less painful once I trekked into the uncharted areas of it, once I allowed myself to openly within, I didn't want to be like locked up or anything
Right.
because
Right. Right.
I could have been. That's where the privacy part comes in, where you use
Mhm.
discretion as to what you're going to share with people, but you're going to open it up a little bit more and do some sharing and do some um, creative work or some ritual or some investigative work about this being in,
Mhm.
in the wilderness of being and grief, in the wilderness of, let's see, the wilderness of being in the wilderness of grief.
Yeah. No, I
I mean,
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
really different ball game than being in grief.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk about your process then? Like
Yeah.
what you actually, you don't have to don't have to get too much away that's in the
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
but
No, no. That's okay.
there's a lot of rituals, there's a lot of
Yeah.
creation, there's a lot of things that you did to actually help move yourself
Mhm.
through that. So
Yeah.
what did you do?
Well, I was fortunate in that from a very early age, I've always been kind of creative and kind of like totally creative.
Only 50
Um,
years of being an art
Only 50
professor,
years of
yes.
actually from the time I was like could
Yeah.
spell my name, but um, so I do have that as an advantage. But I think everyone, here's my belief about that. In our wilderness of being, we are creative beings. Human beings are creative.
Agreed.
I don't care if it's making a hot fudge sundae or the way you wash your car. We're creative and we find ways of doing things that are uniquely our own ways of doing things. Creativity is just an expression of our being. And when we
Mhm.
get into the wilderness of our being, we are more expressive because we allow ourselves more possibilities. So, interestingly enough, when my son died, I had been making art before that, drawings and
Mhm.
various writings and so forth, primarily about childhood trauma because I had a lot of
Mhm.
childhood trauma. So I
Mhm.
was working on that stuff. When he died, all that stuff didn't mean anything to me. I'm like, that's like a drop in the bucket. That's like nothing.
Mhm.
I
Well,
mean, like,
you were a different person now
I'm
too,
like,
right?
that doesn't even make
Yeah.
sense anymore.
Yeah.
That's like, and so I thought, oh, along with the death of my son was the death of my art self. I mean, I felt devastated by that. And people do have a sense of identity death when their loved ones die. They can have a very strong, it's particularly a child or someone who's very, 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 very close relationship where you're just tied in, at the soul level. When you lose that person, or it can be even a dog. Like, if
Mm.
I lost my dog, I'd be devastated.
I
I would
I
be
I
done.
I hear you.
You
Yes.
know? I mean, people
Yes.
say, "Oh, it's a pet." No, no. It depends on the
Yeah.
relationship. But anyways, the relationship, soul relationship. When that happens, there's like this loss of self, and in that can be loss of identity, a loss of meaning, loss of hope, loss of all those things, right?
Mm.
And then if you use any of that stuff, which we do, we use who
Mhm.
we are, we use how we have processed things. If we lose it, then we're faced with looking at grief, which is described as a particular thing in a
Mhm.
container that we're allowed to stay in, that we can't
Mm.
get out of unless we decide, okay, so I've lost my identity, I've lost my sense of creativity. I feel like that's how I solved my problems in my life, was to creatively work them out through writing or art or just thinking, creative thinking. I had none of it. It was like I had this little nanotube that I was n barely anything could come in. And then I'm faced with the container, stay in the container. Your life is doomed. You'll always be this way. This is gonna be horrible. I was like
Mhm.
completely suicidal at the time, but I had
Mhm.
kids. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that to my kids. But I was like, I can't. I don't know what I'm gonna do. At some point, um, and it started with a friend of mine who lived on a beautiful acreage up in Grass Valley. Wild, beautiful place. And there's the Bear River ran through it.
Mhm.
And his wife and him said, "Come up here, get in the river. Like that'll be great." And she was a Jungian psychologist, and she said, "Everything's grief. So this is just a bigger bundle of it
Mhm.
than ever, and it's all going to get very complicated. Get in that water. Float in that water. Get in that river." And come here and stay here. They had a little cabin that I could stay in, and I went up there and I went down in the river and I floated in the river. And as the river was rushing past me, I felt like you can either go with what's happening or you can stay stuck. And it was a sort of a weird, like, because the river kept changing, each day it looked different when I went down there. Sometimes it was really full, sometimes it was a little less full. There were little eddies and little pools, and there was the coldness, there was you had to hike down this awful ravine to get down to the, base of it, the bank of it, and, just sinking my feet into silt. We've talked about grounding.
Mhm.
I'll tell you, like, there was something about being rooted in earth and then floating in water and then coming back and making a fire, and I
Mhm.
suddenly thought, "I need the elements. I need air," it's the air to the open sky. Air, fire, water,
Yeah. So
and earth.
it's life right there. Yeah.
It's life right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And if I could incorporate those into getting myself back to nature,
Mhm.
which is the wilderness of being, I might be able to break through something. Like, I knew there was something, but I didn't think I was making art. And meanwhile, I was documenting it as I was doing it, going down to the river, floating in the river. I took my son's blanket down to the river and flowed down the river with my son's blanket. Um, I had a friend of mine bury me in the earth to feel what
Mhm.
that felt like. I set my son's clothes on fire. I did all these things that use the elements. But the breakthrough was after a year of going back and forth to the river. Um, I was at home and I opened up my son's ashes and I said, "I don't understand what these are. They're not him, but I don't understand what they are. There's got to be something here." And as an artist, I'm like, these have to be art materials, like, of
Mhm.
some kind. And what I mean by art materials is that I can process these like I would put my hands in clay and see the fingerprints. I sifted the ashes, I put my hands down, and I saw my fingerprints. And I'm like, I'm in there somewhere, like there's
Mhm.
something
You
about
are.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were my sons. They came from my body. They came
Mm.
out of my body. He's gone. Now I've got them back. I tasted them. I smelled them. I touched them. That's the wild animal mother wanting to
Absolutely.
know what's here, what's here, what's left, what's not left.
Mm.
And then I buried my face into them and lifted my face up, and there was my image of my face in absolute horror. And I photographed it. And my daughter walked in and I had ash. She was 16 at the time. I had ash all over my face, down my clothes. There's a bowl in front of me with this face in ashes. And she walks over, and I didn't expect her. She was at in high school or whatever,
Mm.
16 years old, and she'd come home early. And she was used to me being an artist, so it wasn't unusual, but she was a little bit like, whoa. And she walked over and she goes, "Do you need help?" And
Mm.
I thought she meant psychologically, but she didn't. She actually got the camera and helped me photograph it.
Oh,
And
wow.
she
Yeah.
photographed my face. And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." And she goes, "You're making art." That's what she said.
Mm.
And I thought, "No, no, I haven't made art in a year. I no." And she goes, "Yeah, no, there's something to this. This is real. You're making art." And it's just not the kind of art that I've ever made before. So then I went, "Oh, oh, oh, wow, wow, okay." See, that's when I was stuck in, this is what I know. This is what I know how to do. This is
Mhm.
what I've done. This is what I believe. This
Mhm.
is, all in that little container of grief that they call grief.
Mhm.
And I cracked it open and went, I can do whatever I want. I
Mhm.
can now with intent explore the wide open thing called grief that I'm calling grief that is
Yeah.
very different than the encapsulated, this is how you
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah.
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 And it is a
Absolutely.
wildness. It's a wilderness. It's horrifying and scary and big and ever consuming. And I would still have moments of, suicidal ideology and various other things, which is not uncommon in grief. And um, not very many people admit it because it's like people think you're crazy if you do that, or like,
Mhm.
oh, wow, I've never felt that before, but have you lost a child?
Right.
Yeah, so that's that difference, I think, is trying to hold it in this container and do it the way you think you're supposed to do it, to just getting rid of the container
Yeah.
and
Throw it out.
allowing an experience, putting your face in ash or floating down a river. Or see, my body already knew because it wanted to go down that
Mhm.
river.
Yeah.
I mean, I was invited to, but I'm like, yeah, that sounds like I had never even thought, yes, that sounds like a great idea.
Mhm.
And it was really beneficial. Really, water is. They told me that they had a friend that was a Native American that they did a lot of work with, who was a neighbor of theirs, and he um, had taught them how to use the river as a place of soothing your emotions and calming your body and stuff. And I've done it ever since. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, like you said, you were just up on a mountaintop, getting up on a mountaintop and having a view, getting in the river and feeling the current, going in the ocean and feeling the movement. All of it, it's like the earth will show you
Yeah.
how your body behaves
Yeah. And what it needs. Yeah,
and what it
absolutely.
needs.
And well, and rivers for me have always been a place of healing. They've always
Mhm.
been a place of, as a fisherman, but even just as a human being, a place that when I'm in my darkest spaces and lowest points in my life, that I have been able to go to rivers, and they've offered me healing. They've offered me love. They've offered me all of the things
You know what
that I
I think
needed.
yeah, you know what I think it is? For me, it was movement.
Mhm.
It's
It
like
is.
the arteries of the earth practically, if you could get into lava, it
Absolutely.
probably would do the same thing, right? But you can't bathe in lava, you know?
That sounds quite a bit less
It's a little
appetizing, but
overkill, right?
yeah,
But the
yeah.
but the river is like this whole other artery system that is, it's not always flowing. In some places it ebbs and flows and so forth, but,
Mm.
if you can get into a river that's, always running, it always changes in the speed and the flow and the feeling of it. It reminds you that you're if you're static or not. And
Mhm.
in the bubble, in the grief bubble that was not very comfortable for me,
Mhm.
there was no room for a grief bubble in the river. It needed the full expanded grief wilderness.
Yeah.
It's the only way. I mean, it it wasn't even a question, like, as soon as I got in the water, the grief wilderness came, like, it was just that simple.
Yeah, and the river washed it away. Yeah, I was on another podcast, someone else's podcast a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the very same thing,
Oh,
the
wow.
power of the river to wash away the
Yeah.
grief. And yeah, so
And you know
it's
what's interesting about that is that, um, I talk about that, and I don't know that I've had a conversation with too many people about that, so I don't know how many people know that. But you know that, and
I
we haven't really talked about that, and, I'll bet many people that have been in a river or know what it's like to just let your body be in the river and moving with the river, that has that great tendency to just bring you back to yourself. It's probably a vagal nerve too, like, I bet it's physically, uh, has those qualities. It's like being massaged, it's wonderful. You get back in your body. You feel the
yeah.
earth.
Yeah, I'm sure there's biology to it. I know nothing about it. All I know is the emotional quality of it and the spiritual
Mhm.
quality of it, and only know that from listening right here. I mean, it's
Exactly.
they have the ability. Rivers have the ability, and nature in all capacities has the ability to hold us when nothing else can, when we can't
Yeah.
hold ourselves. Right.
And the
That's
river
what
has
nature
a
can do
has a song, doesn't it? I mean, the river sings to you.
for sure.
And then around it, there's all the other nature that's around the river, unless it's the LA River.
Well, hey, listen,
Maybe the LA River's good too.
listen, and yeah, I'm quite fond of the LA River. I didn't
No,
think
I
we were
like the
going,
LA River too. Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a very, very different way. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
it's for time for a different podcast.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to circle back to the rituals that you were doing because
Mhm.
like this you had a lot of them, and I thank you for sharing the river space and the ones that you shared because I think that ash moment in your book is one of the most just like it hit me right here when I was reading it.
It's
I
pretty
was like,
startling. Yeah.
it gets you. And I think ritual, and I think you would probably agree, but like ritual is really important in this movement, ritual and the moving through grief, right? Because it too is like ritual itself when we is like this liminal state, right?
Uh-huh.
That allows us to move from between like our lives, our individual lives and our bodies and through spirit, right?
Mhm.
And it's almost like a wild space that allows for radical
Oh,
change,
it is. Totally. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
as
you
you were
could fake ritual. You could do fake ritual and not get
sure,
anything from it.
for
But if
sure,
you are
yeah,
actually engaging yourself, isn't it? It's hard to explain sometimes because you can say to someone, make a ritual, do a ritual around this, but if they
right,
just go through the motions of it, that's not going to work,
not the same, no,
It's like going to a birthday party and you have to bring a present, but weren't really into it, and you didn't
yeah,
even know what to get them, but if you you have to bring meaning to it.
mm,
It require, or you have to be open to there being meaning, and it's so weird, because I felt myself not, trying to do a ritual, and it was difficult because I was just feeling kind of blocked.
mhm, mhm,
And other times when I've done a ritual and it's like completely transformed me, like made
right,
major leaps. Like people talk about microdosing. I think it's probably like microdosing,
mhm, mhm,
that it's that there's some kind of high that you get from participating in something, but I think it's the creative energy. I think creative energy is a process, and it processes whatever it is that your intent is. So if I do a ritual with the intent of opening my heart, then I can think of even the dumbest thing and making a little heart shape and then maybe putting flowers on it or something. That's a place to
yeah,
start. If people don't understand how to even start a ritual, just maybe do a drawing, as a ritual.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a for our Western culture, especially growing up, where I grew up in the area, like even that word ritual it carries a lot of baggage with
Yeah,
it, and
yeah,
negative for me, actually, when I not
yeah,
now,
mhm,
but like it
right,
used to,
yeah,
right?
like you're a
And
witch or something, yeah,
right, yeah, and I think
or culty.
culty maybe more to the
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Um, but I think there's definitely a correlation between like what you're saying, like the fake ritual, and the power of it, and being, you have to have a create an open space and connect into that very same space that I would say that we have to connect to when we're creating art, or
Oh,
when we're
totally,
creating, because there's the same thing, like
the
we
same
can,
thing.
you can sit at the computer or write, and you can force yourself, okay, I'm gonna write and do this, and like there's a benefit to doing those things, right? Just in
Mhm.
the, production thing. But if we're actually looking at it from a healing perspective, and we're actually trying to work through something, and we actually want something real and authentic, and to connect to our actual own humanity, like we cannot do it without intention and without creating the space,
Right,
right?
right. Those two things are key, I think.
Yeah.
Like if you, yeah, I think that's just key, right? And make it interesting.
Hmm.
But if you don't
Absolutely.
have time and you're can't go anywhere, just make it where you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing with
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why, you said we keep grief in a bubble, and we do a lot of the things that we do because of the way that we've structured our lives societally,
Mhm.
right? Because we have jobs, and we have kids, and we have all of these things that make it very difficult to have the necessary space to actually move through the grief, or have the necessary space to actually create art, or whatever or to do a ritual, whatever it actually is. Like, it's we tell ourselves, and I, at least I tell myself, have told myself in the past, like, well, I don't have time for that, I have to do
Oh
this. I
yeah,
don't have time
totally.
for that, I have
Yep.
to do this, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's a very, very normal, very, very normal thing.
Hmm.
And at the same time, what I've found is that, like, if we actually do create the space for that, whether it's to go to a river, whether it's to create art, or whatever it is, to create the space and time and intention in our lives, then and actually slow down and sit in some stillness, or whatever it happens to be,
Hmm.
then all of those other things that we have in our life, they become we so much easier to do, and
Yeah.
so much easier to
Hmm.
move through, right? And
Hmm.
they and yeah, life becomes not just this thing that we have to do, but it becomes this thing that we were able to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And
you
that
know,
brings me right back to grief. Like, if we don't have a way through it other than what they've confined into the ball, like grief groups and reading and going to a counselor, which are all good things because I use them.
mhm,
But if that's all there is, I don't know that that would be that easy to move through grief. But you can move through grief if you give yourself the allowance, the time allowance to have a time and a space to do a little processing. Whether it's doing some breathing or having somebody lay hands on you and massage, or body work, or dancing, or making art, or you know bringing in all kinds of modalities that gets the creative process moving. And once you tap into that, you have a mode of moving. I think that's where the river comes in. If you have a mode of moving, you won't be static in the bubble. And I think that's what they're referring to when they say it's going to be forever. Because if you stay there,
mhm. It is forever.
it's
Yeah,
pretty much forever. It's not,
yeah,
I don't,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, Jane, I just want to say I thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, it's great.
I have one more question I want to ask you. If you could leave the listeners with a message, or advice,
Mm.
or anything, maybe someone who's going through something similar as you, or any type of grief, what message or advice would you leave them with?
I think my greatest message is the one that I wanted to instill from my book, is that um, grief is a weird gift. It's transformational if you allow it, and that if you can get yourself out of the grief bubble and do something, anything to save your life, then do it, because it's going to be worth doing. And the creative process is really is the way through it, and everyone's a creative human being, so it just means finding something that works for you, even though it doesn't fit the grief bubble.
Yeah.
That's all.
Find your own creativity that works for you.
Find your own creativity that works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and find your
Mhm.
own way through.
Yeah.
Well, Jane, thank you. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure. I'm sure I'll see you soon online.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Um, and to all of you out there, thank you for listening to another episode of the Wild Lab. It's Ned Widener, and I'm going to be out there wading rivers, climbing mountains, and writing prose. So until next time, stay
All right.
wild.
That's great. My pleasure too.
Thank you, Jane.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Lab. If today's conversation stirred something in you and you're ready to connect to your own inner wildness, then check us out online on Instagram at Step Into Your Wild, or go on over to www.stepintoyourwild.com to learn more about our coaching services and wilderness academies offered through Walker's School of the Wild. Look, this is real work for real people who want to live with more clarity, more purpose, and more strength, but you don't have to figure it out alone. Let's walk this road together. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, stay wild.